Hey folks, this is Philip with the Everyday Fighter podcast, where we share stories and insights from everyday fighters just like you. Today I'm speaking with Dan Zehner. He is a married father of three and the host of the podcast Anthem of the Adventurer. Today I talk with him about his journey with his young son starting Tae Kwon Do classes together. And they're still fairly new to that process. But he shares with me just the ups and downs of that process, starting things up, having expectations, not getting those expectations met, and where they're at right now. It's a very interesting journey for them. But also he gets into some of the things that he had struggled with growing up and even into his adulthood, as far as getting more confidence in himself. And he has a really fascinating approach to building that up and making sure that's something that gets passed on to his family as well. So really looking forward to sharing his words with you. But before we do that, I wanted to get into our episode spotlight. As a reminder, these spotlights are unsponsored. These folks typically have no idea who I am. They definitely don't know that I'm doing this. But once in a while, there's a cause or an individual that I run across, and I just think that they're doing great work in the world, and I just want to kind of share more about what they're doing. And today I wanted to talk about the Good Dad Project. This is an organization actually that I'm a part of. And it's a group of men, fathers, that have banded together to support each other. A lot of times it can be very taxing as a father, and it may be such that you feel like you're alone. And when I found this organization, I felt that I wasn't alone anymore. There were men in there that were looking to not only improve their home situations with their wives and with their children, but also to improve themselves. And just having a group of people that I can go to without any judgment, to share my highs and lows, has been invaluable to me. Larry Hagner there is a friend of mine. He's the founder of the Good Dad Project and their Dad Edge Alliance. Highly recommend them. Wonderful group of people. And you can check them out at gooddadproject.com. That's it for today's Spotlight. Let's jump into our chat with Dan Zehner.
I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, is my hometown, and trying to think of so parents were an engineer and a bioscientist, and then stay-at-home mom. Got a younger sister, and she's 3 years younger than me. I just kind of grew up in like conservative household. They were actually, my parents were really like against martial arts. They were always like, oh, it's Eastern mysticism, like real conservative Christian household. And so I grew up with this like kind of tension of wanting to get into things, because I grew up in the 90s of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Karate Kid, and like my friends were doing karate and things, and just was never able to get into it. Then we moved to Illinois when I was in sixth grade. My grandfather was not doing so well health-wise and wanted to be closer to family and things like that. And there, when I got into high school, we had some exposure to self-defense classes as part of it's really cool, like kind of like anti-drug, like self-improvement kind of retreat that we did every year. We did like a self-defense thing with a guy who became a friend of mine. He was a multi-degree black belt, and I'm not sure which discipline, but that was my first real exposure. Like, oh, this is what martial arts can be. Like, it doesn't have to necessarily be, towards the kind of mystic side, although that is really cool. It's more, hey, this is physical fitness. It's functional. It's useful in everyday situations. And so that kind of piqued my interest and kind of got me into, I want more of this when I'm able to. And over the next few years, got a few other opportunities to get into various kinds of martial arts. From let's see, I think my next foray into it was, we were living in Connecticut after my wife and I got married, and I was working at a shipyard in Groton doing hydraulic systems engineering for submarines. And a friend of mine told me that she had started up at a Krav Maga studio. I'm like, well, that sounds cool. And I had been doing a little bit of research on martial arts from the Art of Manliness blog. He had talked about various kinds of martial arts, and one of them was Krav. I'm like, yeah, that would be really cool to try. So I went to one class, and I thought, I've got asthma, like not seriously, but kind of performance induced. And by the end, I was sucking wind, felt like I was going to die, but felt amazing. Like that space where you're at once feeling absolutely broken down to your fundamental elements, but ready to rebuild yourself into something stronger. And I was like, oh yeah, I want some more of this. And I couldn't afford to do Krav at the time, but I'm like, as soon as I'm able to do more of this, I am going to. And a few years later, we moved to Indiana. I met a friend at church who introduced me to, he's a CEO of a real estate development company of all things, but he's a really cool guy. And he did this thing called a Manly Skills Weekend. We've only done one, which is really sad, but the one was awesome. And it was a whole weekend where he brought in instructors and everything. It was like my first foray into like a mastermind group, but for a weekend. Like, so we had a Marine who taught at SEER school, like survival, escape, evasion, and reconnaissance. We had the county coroner, who was a multi-degree black belt in a couple of disciplines of martial arts, taught us self-defense and knife fighting and like how to defend yourself with a stick and, all sorts of things. And also combat casualty care, like, and then we learned, basics of firearms from dry shooting with pistols to range basics to tactical movements and reloading and shooting from cover and like shooting at multiple targets. And then that night we got to learn from a sheriff how to clear your house with a flashlight and a pistol, and then practicing at night in the dark on the range of like drawing and shooting in close quarters. We learned how to do land navigation during the day. And then we did another land nav course at night, trying to find these little chem lights on a stick in the middle of the woods and fields full of fireflies. So it's pitch dark. There's like, wow, half moon. And you're trying to find a green light going by compass coordinates on a map in a field of a billion green lights, little fireflies. So anyway, that was the next like martial arts thing, but it baked into this whole like awesome, skills weekend. And
that was a weekend.
It was a weekend.
You did all that stuff.
Yeah. It was 2 days. It was insane.
Was that like, did you sleep at all? That sounds awesome. And
barely slept. I mean, one of the first things we did there when we got there was we slaughtered a hog and butchered it so that we could throw it on a fire that we made without matches and have it for barbecue that night. It was like, it was nuts.
Man, absolutely. Whoa.
And then, man, I think the next thing was like when Alex was old enough. So my son is our first child. He's now 5, and we've got 2 daughters as well, Jane, who will be 3 next month, and Felicity, who's almost 6 months. And I've always kind of joked that I want to get my daughters into like Brazilian jiu-jitsu or something, so that when they start dating, they're able to handle themselves. And also, we're going to put a big poster of their honorary uncles, Larry Atch and Eric Davis, who are retired Navy SEALs, and I know we'll come if we need them. But knowing that, I'm like, well, I better be a badass too for my daughters, and also show my son his strength, and that aggressiveness is a good thing as a man, but also you need control and discipline and self-esteem and all these things that martial arts can teach you. And so we started looking around. Actually, my wife suggested this program. It's at a church that's also got a community center, and it's right by our house. We've been talking about it for a few months. Like, oh, I want to take him to something and send her ideas about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Krav and a couple other things that have kids classes. She's like, oh, hey, Faith Tae Kwon Do is starting up in a month, and it's cheap relatively for martial arts, and you can do it together, which a lot of these other courses, classes were like, okay, you have a kids class and then afterwards the adults class, and it'd be like a whole evening thing. But this is on a Saturday morning. We can do it together. We both start out at a white belt, and it was awesome. So we showed up, and I had all these grand ideas of, the first day we're going to get in there and we're going to do our, we're going to learn together, and it's going to be this great bonding experience. And we get there, and he is terrified. Like, the kid is very sensitive about a lot of things, but extremely wary about new experiences, especially in big groups with people he doesn't know. And so we get into this gym full of people he doesn't know with our instructor, who is a very kind and gentle lady, but she yells because it's a group of people trying to do Tae Kwon Do together. And so he's standing on his little, spot next to all his little friends in the front row. And I'm all the way across the gym, and he is crying uncontrollably. And we barely make it through like the beginning, kind of all of the colored belts and the white belts are all together doing stretching and your basic stances and that kind of thing. And then the white belts break off, and instantly he's just attached to my leg pretty much the whole class. Like, I'm half trying to like learn myself and do the things, and encourage him to do the things, but not ignore him, and realizing that he's really having a tough time with this. So like, I'm having to stop and get down next to him, like, hey, you got to listen to the instructor. Just do what he says. He's like, but I don't know how to do it. I can't do it. I'm like, that's why we're here. We're learning. I don't know how to do this either. And at one point he had to go to the bathroom. And so we went out and we came back and I had like a little pep talk with him in the hallway. I was like, look, I just need you to put in your full effort. Like, I don't care that if you're not able to do the moves, but I just want to see that you're doing the best you can. That's what matters here, because we're learning, we're growing, we're making mistakes. I'm screwing up all over the place here, and I didn't handle this as well as I could have, for sure. But I was trying to impress upon him that effort was the important thing, and that we're going to stick this out, and it's fun. We're here to have fun and learn and make mistakes, and failing is totally fine, and encourage. And this is what it's about. But it didn't land well at all. And we got out of the class, and I asked him if he wanted to do it again. He's like, no, and crying about it. And we had kind of laughed with the instructor afterwards. He was wearing this Spider-Man sweatshirt, and she was like, oh, next week when you come back, make sure you wear your Spider-Man sweatshirt. I'll wear my Wonder Woman t-shirt. And she was like really awesome, like trying to connect with him and show him that, it's okay. We want you here. We want you to come back. And I realized a few things after that day I got home, and you saw the post I made in the Alliance, the dads group that we're in. I was like, I was so frustrated with him at first, because I thought he wasn't putting forth a full effort. And I was like, I really would just want him to put in 100% effort. But then looking back, he was. It was just not what I perceived as 100%. And more of what I was frustrated was myself not preparing him well for the class so that he could live up to what I perceived to be 100% effort, actually trying all the moves and doing, responding to the instructors appropriately and that kind of thing. And so over the next week, after some really good feedback from some Alliance guys and some other guys, was like, okay, we need to prime and prep better this week for what we can expect in class on Saturday. And so we started watching videos together, like inspirational stuff of like, hey, if you really stick with this, you can do some cool stuff when you like flying flip kicks, kicking boards and stuff. And he was like, oh, can we do that, Dad? I'm like, yeah, if you practice a whole lot and stick with it. He's like, oh, okay. And after a few, days of that, and then we went over, okay, when we get into class on Saturday, it's going to be just like last time. We're going to line up. You're going to be in front with kids your size. And then we're going to get off into our group and we're going to learn some stuff together and we're going to practice it. And it totally stuck. Like the second class, he was a little nervous, but then after like the first few minutes, he was totally fine. Like we got into it, and each week he was excited to go. He was, because he got his uniform the second week. We got our uniform the second week, and we went home with our white belts on, and we showed my wife and our, my daughters, the few moves that we had learned. And he was so excited to be doing something with Dad that was cool and like powerful and, something that every week he could improve, and both of us were improving. And so that third week, then we started seeing him like the third, fourth, fifth weeks, his stances were improving. He was improving his flexibility. I mean, he was already a flexible kid. He's 5 years old. Of course he's flexible, but, and then I'm noticing that I'm improving my fitness in just a few short weeks. Like, I'm working out and rucking all over the place, but my flexibility has always been one of my weak points. But, like our floor stretching, is butterfly stretches and extending your leg out to one side and trying to grab your toes. And I can actually grab my toes on both sides, which I've never been able to do before. And that feels pretty darn good. And then, throughout the few weeks, our kicks are getting higher. And now I'm able to kick to like face height. And he's able to kick almost over his head. The kid is nuts. And we're learning, it's a simple form. The first one, it's called Song Om number 1. It's only 18 moves, but at first it was seeing him like getting really scared about even doing it slowly. But then as we started practicing it, he's able to do all the moves. And by the last couple of weeks, we're practicing it at home together, and he's able to call out the moves, and we do them together slowly. And then, I mean, I sent you guys the video of our test last week. So 8 weeks in the session, we go from scared out of his mind to he can count to 10 in Korean confidently. He can kick face height, confidently do all the stances, all the basic moves, some punches, some kicks, some blocks. He's got the form down. He's got the one step. There's 3 different kind of responses to 2 different kinds of attacks. He's got those down. And like every week, the instructor's calling him out like, Alex, that was an awesome middle stance. Like that was really good. Like the kid just down there low with his, knees bent and his fists up, and he's got his game face on, and, or she'll call out like, oh, that was a really great front kick. Like it was just really cool to see the growth that he made. And we both made together in a few short weeks of instruction and practice in the group. And now we've tested and completed got our orange belt, so we can go practice the next level form starting next week with the rest of the colored belts. And it's just been really, really awesome. And I love, so we are a family of faith. We still, profess a deep relationship with Christ in our faith, in our family. And every class at this group, to start with prayer, which is just really great way to center like who we are with this new way of being, of the spirit of Tae Kwon Do, of discipline, of respect, of control over your actions, of fitness. And it's all brought together under, the undercurrent of faith, which we really appreciate. And so it was really cool to be able to share that with my mom too, and my dad, of like, hey, this is what you thought Taekwondo and martial arts was like, this mystic, Eastern religion force, whatever, that's to be feared and to stay away from. But really it's a lively, vibrant, art that is helpful and healthy, and can also have an element of our own faith in it. And it's just been really awesome. Looking forward to everything that's coming next. So we found like one of our friends from church is a black belt in Taekwondo. And so we've seen him in a couple of the classes. There's an advanced class afterwards, so they mix sometimes, but he's bringing in his weapons and stuff, and got the wooden sword and everything. And Alex is like, when do we get to use swords? I'm like, when you're a black belt.
Nice, dude. Well, actually, like, how because you brought it up, how did your parents react when you brought that up to them, in terms of like, hey, this is what you thought it was, here's our experience, and what was that like?
Yeah, they were, I don't know if surprised is quite the word, but something along those lines of like, oh, that's a lot different than we thought it was. Like, even, we were telling them about how the class was structured, and Alex was demonstrating how to count to 10 in Korean, and they're like, what's that? Some mystic chant? And like, no, he's counting to 10 in Korean. Like, and our instructor brought it up too. Like, she's like very explicit about these kind of things, because I'm sure she's heard a lot of that, of like, okay, we're not, chanting something here. We're just counting to 10 in Korean. Like, chill out, guys. And so it was a lot of that kind of teaching of, okay, this is really what this is about. It's about discipline. It's about self-control. It's about fitness. It's about flexibility. Learning new, some elements of another culture, which is great, and it's nothing to be scared of. It was, some graceful redirection of their perceptions of that.
Absolutely. Well, this particular program with the church, is that a program specifically for kids and their parents, or that's just like their standard program and you're part of it? You're in there, kids and adults, alike.
Yeah, it's a kids and adults all mixed together. Parents are encouraged to do it with their kids, but it's not just a parents and kids thing. There's adults doing it on their own. Yeah.
What has it meant for you to be able to do this with him? Because most parents are content to like, hey, let's enroll them. We'll step away. We'll sit. We'll sit on the side and watch, and they're fine with that. But that's you were specifically looking to do something together with your boy. What has this process been for you in that regard?
Yeah, I wanted to be really intentional with that. Of not one of my big goals as a dad is, to the greatest extent possible, not be the kind of dad who sits on the sidelines reading a book and watching YouTube while his kid is doing something. I want to be in it with him. That's going to mean we're going to make a lot of different choices than a lot of American parents will. I'm not going to be coaching his little league team. I'm just not going to do that, because it takes up too much time, and we don't actually do it together. And it takes away from what we want as a family, which is experiences and learning things together and teaching each other things. So this is one of those things where we can learn together. I can teach him things, but he can also teach me things, and we can experience the same thing in different ways.
So he has other activities that you mentioned. Little League. He's part of, like, he does.
No, he's not.
Yeah. Oh, he's not. Okay.
Yeah, I'm saying like that's not going to be a thing.
Okay. Gotcha.
Like, I hear other guys in the alliance, and no judgment, but this is just what I want for my family. like kids who are 6 years old in baseball 3 nights a week from 7 to 9, and their dad is feeling obligated to be the assistant coach, and he's taking time away from his wife and other kids, and like he's just coaching the team, and everybody's getting home tired. Relationships are getting broken down instead of built up, and I will not stand for that in my family. Anything that we do has to build our relationships together rather than bring them apart. So it's got to protect our sleep. It's got to protect our faith. It's got to protect our fitness and our time together as a family.
That's good stuff, man. Just the being very clear in terms of what you're trying to get in terms of an experience, not only for your boy, but also for how it relates to your family as a whole.
Yeah,
that's awesome. When you one of the things you talked about earlier that was kind of the initial expectation, okay, we're going to do this thing. And, you had your own experience with it, even as a teenager and as a young adult, with those other things that you were doing. But this was his first foray into this. Is that correct? Okay.
I mean, the only thing close to this he'd ever done before was just, playing Ninja Turtles with me. Nothing even close. I mean, he's been in preschool, he's been in a school environment, but not like this.
What was that like for you when you're standing there and you're seeing him kind of like react the way he did, kind of breaking down and everything? And was there a pull for you to go get him and like kind of comfort him, or like were you like, I mean, what was that process like for you to see? Like, one, you had your expectations, and then second thing is, oh my gosh, well, it's not being met. It's like, well, now what?
Yeah. It was like, hold it together, kid. Like, you could do this, and for me too, it was like, all right, I got to show him that this is okay, that it's okay to be afraid, but we're going to do this anyway. And so I'm going to stand my ground here. I'm going to do my thing, and I'm just going to model for him what this is supposed to look like, and he can come along or not at his speed. And so that's kind of how I took it. It's like, all right, we just gotta try and do as much of it as we can, make the best of it.
Did it enter in your mind at all of like, well, maybe this ain't it?
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah. I was like, I mean, probably, I don't know, most of the way through the class, I was like, I don't know about this. I think I even said to the instructor, like, we're just going to talk about it this week. We'll hopefully see you next week, but maybe not. And that felt really crappy. I was like, I don't like to give up on stuff. I kind of, one of my big things is like figuring it out and persisting through obstacles. And the idea of throwing in the towel really, really hurt, because it was a real possibility that we were just not going to do this.
That's an interesting, I mean, we want to teach our kids, right, about, as you're saying, perseverance. Like you make a decision, hopefully informed decision, but you make a decision in any case. It's kind of like that stick to it ish kind of, you want them to be able to go down the route that they've chosen for themselves, right? Make a decision, go with it. Then there's going to be a point when, for all of us, in any decision that we make, where it could be like, what, the decision I made has put me on a railroad track that is headed for a brick wall.
Right. Yeah.
And when for you, what helps you to decide when it's time to bail and time to, you still got to stick with it, particularly when it comes to your kids?
Yeah. With stuff like this, I'm realizing more and more, it's like, he's 5. Like, he needs to be exposed to things at least 2 or 3 times before we can even make an informed decision about whether he actually wants to do it or not. Like, new foods, new anything. Like, he's got to be exposed to it more than once, as long as it's not absolutely dangerous or whatever. As long as it's something that we've decided that either together or my wife and I or just me or just him, like if you've committed to a decision, you got to do it at least 2 or 3 times before you can say, I don't like it, or I don't want to do that anymore. And with this program, it really helped is like, okay, it's 8 weeks long. We're just going to go for the 8 weeks, and for now, like, let's just go for the next week and see how that goes. And then we'll go to week 3. And then if you really don't like it, we could maybe not go after that, but we're just going to go next week.
So there's a tempering of, yes, we want to, but I mean, to your point, I mean, you know your child, things that you've tried in the past, whether it's food or anything else. And it's like, okay, well, we can kind of understand a bit better, like what his threshold is, and of course, what your threshold is.
Yeah,
kind of taking the resistance that might come from your children, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But even for you, I mean, this is like a kind of a growth thing as well. Do you feel when you're going through, and I know like you've mentioned making those personal accomplishments, right? Your flexibility and being able to kick and that type of thing. Do you see this as something that is yours as well, or is it more of that you're there to have the shared experience with him?
I see it as both, and I mean, this is my chance to kind of own my martial arts journey too, of like, yeah, I can really have some mastery here, and I can really learn some new skills and do some things that with my physical health that I want and need to do, I don't know, on my own, like flexibility and control and preventing injuries and the other crazy stuff that I do. So yeah, it's as much for me as it is for him.
Good. I want to go back a little bit to when you talked about when you moved and you went to, I can't remember if you're saying if it was part of your high school program or church, but you had a kind of a self-defense type program that you'd gone through.
Yeah.
With the multidisciplinary black belts and stuff, showing you a lot of different things. What was that? Where did that come from? Was that something that it was just, again, was it part of your school, part of your church? And it just, I guess the reason I'm asking is because I don't hear that very often in terms of like, hey, take a self-defense class kind of thing, especially at that age.
Yeah. Yeah. It was awesome. It was, so this whole like weekend thing, it was, it's called Snowball. And so it was like, a few different tracks you could take, a few different kind of classes you could take, everything from like, they didn't call it meditation, but it was essentially meditation, how to relax in a guided way. They had, of course, kind of self-esteem and anti-drug kind of stuff, but also self-defense. And it was one of the most popular classes. And it was, I can't remember, it was an hour or 2 hours, but it was long enough to actually learn some stuff about how to get out of a tense situation, various grabbing kind of attacks and how to get out of them. And then they showed some really fun stuff about like how to put somebody to sleep.
Real fun.
It was like, do not try this kind of thing, but I need a volunteer and I'm going to knock them out. And I can't even remember what he did. It was basically just like touching them in a very specific place, like under the cheek or something like that, with a really targeted blow, and it just out like a light bulb. Yeah. And it was always hilarious. But, leading up to that was, some really good techniques about how to, assess a situation, how to get out of, somebody who's trying to grab you or hold you, and kind of common scenarios you might find yourself in, which I think was especially valuable for the girls in the group, but also as guys is like pretty cool to be able to throw somebody around and feel like your power can be used in an appropriate way. But also how you need to control yourself and how you don't want to be on the other side of this exchange of being the aggressor.
Was this part of like a high school kind of
Yeah.
activity? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a optional weekend, high school kind of lock-in kind of thing.
Oh, okay. Very, very, very cool. Huh.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, man. Yeah. That's did you have any situations come up growing up when you might have needed something like that, whether it was before or after the class? I mean, were you ever in fights, were you ever bullied or anything like that?
I was bullied, and I think I only ever got in one fight, and I got a royal kick to the nuts, like
literally
wind up soccer kick that landed me in the nurse's office for the afternoon. But I was never really like we didn't grow up in a rough neighborhood or anything like that, and I didn't find myself in the kind of crowds that got me into fights. I got kind of verbally bullied a bit, and I think some extra self-confidence from something like martial arts would have really helped a lot when I was a kid, because I had no self-confidence at all. Like I had very little self-esteem. I'm still working through that, honestly. And so some way to feel confident and powerful at a young age would have been really helpful, even if the physical aspect of it, of the techniques and things, wouldn't have been extremely applicable. Just the ability to exude confidence in any situation, and be able to tell off some of those jerks who were calling me names or trying to push me around the playground, that kind of thing, would have been really helpful.
Do you think that's where you, because you talked even about, for your girls, they're young right now, but getting them the BJJ and that type of stuff. I mean, I know I was bullied when I was a kid as well, and just kind of that feeling of almost like powerlessness, like you don't have any options other than to take it. Yes,
that's exactly it. Yeah, I didn't feel like I had any other option other than to believe everything that they were saying and internalize it and walk away with my tail between my legs. That was my only option. And it felt like shit. Like I felt like shit about myself most of the time growing up.
Was it such that, because I mean, like I tell, when I teach here, I tell folks that, we're born with this already, like millions of years of evolution. I mean, we have fight in us already. Whether it's a skilled kind of fight or not, right? It's a completely different thing. You can get people like windmilling and that type of thing. But so that's where like kind of training comes in. But I mean, it's because it's in us already. There has to be something else, like those. I mean, you talk about the lizard brains ready to fight, right? But then we have we have more of our thinking and and reason that come into play, and and that keeps us from that. Was it such that just that kind of physicality was frowned upon in your family, or just you had some experiences in the past where that's not a place where you were either allowed to go or that you wanted to go?
I think it was a mix of both. Like, any time that I became friends with like a rougher kid, it was always like, we got to measure our interactions with him, for lack of a better way of putting it, because we don't want to, get mixed up in that kind of thing. And we got to be careful with the things you watch on TV and the video games you play and things like that, so you don't get too violent or whatever. And not that we didn't, my dad and I roughhoused, and obviously my friends and I screwed around quite a bit, and that was, we still had kind of a lot of autonomy, which is great. But at the end of the day, it was aggression and fighting were very much frowned upon.
I think it's a big deal. For even as sometimes you can be in environments where it's very specifically said, like, hey, that is not acceptable. But then there are others where it's less clear, but you still get kind of the signals and the vibe of like, yeah, it's not something that we would be very happy with. And, kind of getting signals of like, okay, this is not this going down that route, even having that ability would not be a good thing, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it was more of that. Yeah, it was less the explicit and more the we just don't do that kind of thing. It wasn't like a thou shalt not.
Right.
I mean, there wasn't a lot of. I don't want to, because I know my parents are going to listen to this, and I'm I know I might be painting them in a slightly unfavorable light, and I apologize for that. But there was not like an encouragement to embrace that. We'll say like there wasn't any like don't get in fight. I mean, they never had to say don't get in fights because I just wasn't even in environments where I was close to.
Sure.
And I'm not saying like I should have gotten into a fight when I was a kid, but like it was it was more implicit, like we aren't fighters. You just take it on the chin and you move on.
Interesting.
And turn the other cheek and things like that.
Gotcha.
Which there's a lot of good in that approach, but also, some harm that has come out of it.
Frustration, I'm sure.
Yeah.
As well. Well, I mean, when you started talking about the other thing that you got into after which was the kind of the men's weekend, was it?
Man,
that I mean, I'd never experienced anything like that before, but I was like, wow, that sounds really awesome. But just your excitement talking about it, and like being exposed to all the stuff, and at that time you're like, were you out of the house already at the time, right? You were in Connecticut and you're already married.
Yeah, this was actually pretty recently. It was like 2015 or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, been married for a few years. Had one kid already.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if Tracy was pregnant with Jane yet or not. Anyway, yeah.
But like just you talking about it, like just kind of lit up, like, wow, we did this and that, and it sounded like, I mean, it just sounded like possibility, completely the opposite, right? It's not like, it was just like, wow, this is really, really cool stuff. And I think you'd mentioned of like, hey, Karate Kid and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and all that kind of stuff. Maybe at the time it sounded like you were exposed to it. It would have been a fun thing, but you didn't have the room to kind of explore that much. Now seeing, having this opportunity with this retreat, this weekend, that like sounds like a tactical weekend kind of a thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it very much was.
Yeah, it just sounded like, wow, it's like all the possibilities now. And I remember, I mean, just you explaining it. I mean, it reminded me of when I first started in martial arts myself, like more formally. And I was in my early 20s. I grew up in a kind of I'd say similar environment where, we didn't really, it was kind of like, it wasn't explicit, but it was like, okay, you don't fight, it wasn't anything that was encouraged, exactly the same words that you used. Right. But I didn't really have that confidence in doing anything like that anyway. But there's still something inside that wanted to kind of come out. I mean, it's just innate. I don't think I could have put my finger on it at the time, and as a teenager. But when I got out on my own and I saw, okay, you know what, I've been wanting to take martial arts for a long time. Luckily, there's a place just down the street from me. It's when I first moved out to LA, and it was a full contact karate, and I didn't know what that meant at the time. But I just know that once I found out what it meant, which is like they don't pull punches. They don't punch to the face, but everything else goes, kind of a thing. Just even when I explain it to people now, like it's, it sounds like that sounds horrible. It was kind of the same type of thing. Like if you're explaining what you were, you're telling me about this guy's weekend or whatever, some people would be like, oh my God, that sounds terrible. That sounds like just so
barbaric
and like brutish and like warmongering kind of stuff or whatever. But for me, when I share it, it's and my enthusiasm, it was more of like, it was my enthusiasm for having an outlet for these things that were already churning inside for a long time. I don't know if that's something you could relate to with when you jumped right into that. Because I mean, were you into like tactical stuff and firearms and all that kind of thing before that?
To a certain extent. I mean, so some of the really great things about my childhood. So we both my parents come from farming families, and we have like a real history with like going out on the back 40 at my dad's parents' place and shooting stuff, and it's just what we do, and it's fun. Like, so Christmas at the Zehners, we'll be out behind the barn and shooting clay pigeons, and my sister will outshoot all of us, and it's great. So we have a history of target shooting, and my dad hunts. I've never been hunting. I just never really got into that. Or was in the military, but liked the tactical kind of stuff. Didn't get into it really until after college, but started getting exposed to things like the Go Ruck Challenge in like 2013 or something. I started training up for my first one, and and kind of got into that world that way. Of now that I'm an adult and got to take care of my own stuff and my own family, and got to be prepared. I was an Eagle Scout. Model of the Boy Scouts, be prepared, right? And so now that over the past few years has become a lot more clear than it used to be, that involves more than just tying knots and first aid. It's, being able to lift heavy stuff and carrying it long distances, and people and carrying them long distances, and being able to defend myself and others from anything that may come our way, and being prepared for emergencies, and dealing with firearms both on the aggressor and defensive side, and just safety in general. All those things have become a lot more interesting over the past few years, but most of them have been there for a while.
Mm-hmm. So it wasn't such that this was like, it really, I mean, it was like really a cool thing to do, in and of itself, that kind of that weekend to doing all those things. But to your point, it was something that these things were already in you already, kind of, building, especially now married, now having a family of your own and children and things, that these really are important things for me to explore and to cultivate.
Yeah. It's really interesting how, like, growing up, I was exposed to a lot of really awesome experiences and skills and things that I only am now appreciating their importance. And I really wish, like, in the moment, going through Boy Scouts especially, it was like, I wish I could have appreciated the full weight of some of the things that I was learning, of like, this is going to really help you someday. Like tying knots, for example, like being able to tie a couple of hitches comes in really handy when you're trying to tie a tarp over your cellar door when a hurricane is approaching. Comes in really darn handy. And I had to look it up when I was, we owned our house when Hurricane Irene and Sandy came in Connecticut. And I literally had to batten down the hatches and like tie tarps over stuff. I'm like, I vaguely remember how to do this, but I got to look it up. And that didn't feel great. It felt cool. Like I knew generally what to do and I had done it a bunch, but I didn't stay in practice because I didn't see it as important. And now I'm like, oh, that's really darn important.
Well, it's like, I think the context was really important there too. Because I mean, if you learned it in the context of, we have to learn these things to get this patch or to go through this curriculum or whatever, and that's just the way things are as as a kid, right? That you're only it's a means to this kind of this ends here, and the patch or whatever it might be. It's the same kind of thing, I think, for martial arts, where it's like there are people that will train to get the stripe or the belt, but that's the context. as opposed to, they don't take it out in the context of like, what things you're talking about, like, oh my gosh, if I had to defend my family kind of thing. So it means more, I say more, but it means something very different,
Yeah.
person
And
versus
it's
you.
good to keep it obviously contextually appropriate to age and experience and all those things. But something that's been really important, impressed is the word I'm searching for, upon me lately by my friend, my mentor, my coach, Larry Yatch, former Navy SEAL, all around badass, is in all of these things growing up in our traditional education system, in organizations like the Boy Scouts, even in martial arts, we're taught a whole lot of what to do's, tactics, a whole lot of, or a fewer, how to do things, strategies, and very rarely why to do things, desired end states. And it's extremely important in this day and age to get those desired end states, the why are we doing this in the first place, nailed down. So much more sense. And it also drives a lot of decisions in actually how to do things and what to do.
Yeah, that having that higher level context in terms of to your point, that why, that desired end state, it will actually shape some of the things that come later, which is in terms of the hows and the whats as well.
Yeah, and that, I kind of alluded to earlier of like, we're not doing little league kind of stuff because my desired end state for our family, and that my wife and I have agreed on, is that we want to foster an environment where we feel close together and we create epic adventures for our family and we give generously and we spend lots of time together and we grow in our relationships together. And so anything that doesn't do that, we don't do.
That's great.
Period.
It's interesting, man. Like, because I'm hearing this, and hearkening back to what you had said earlier in terms of growing up not having a lot of confidence, still working on confidence in yourself, and very difficult for me to pick up on anything where that's really the case, quite frankly. Especially since you're because of this, because of exactly what you're saying, right? In that you have a vision in mind, right? You have that reason why, you have that end state that you're working towards. So it's very easy there. When talking about confidence, think it's easy to vacillate, to waver, and like, it's like, oh, do I go or not go or whatever. Now, of course you take that in its own little context, right? I mean, are there small decisions or the bigger decisions? What are the resources? All that kind of stuff in there. But the fact that you have something that you are working towards and your family's working towards together, it feels like, that confidence is not even, it doesn't even come into play in terms of, there's no question about it, I guess is what I'm saying. It's like, there's no room for whether I have confidence or not. It's just, this is where I'm going.
Yeah. Part of it is, because I reflected on that so much that it helps to be really clear on it. But we're still in this stage of, again, I'll go back to Larry because he has a formula for confidence that is really helpful in distinction. So it starts off with identifying a gap in life. That's always a knowledge gap. Like, I don't even know this thing. Now I know what I want to do with my family and my wife. We know what we want to do. Then it's putting that into action. You learn a skill. And then you've put that skill into practice in a low stakes environment, like Alex and I are doing with Tae Kwon Do. Then that builds experience. And then once you ratchet the stakes up, you gain more experience, and then you gain confidence. So I'm in the mode, the stage right now, in between the practice and the experience, getting towards confidence, if that makes sense, in this area of myself, of who I am. I can be more confident in who we are as a family because I've got more support there because my wife is an awesome teammate. But me on my own, I've got a lot of, like we all do, areas that I need to shore up. And frankly, some areas I don't even know what I don't know enough to start building skills in yet. And so that's where some of the lack of confidence comes out in other things.
Sure. But I think for me, man, I mean, just, in our talking here, most people only work on those, okay, let's get some experience, get the stakes or whatever. They don't, but there's nothing that they're really working towards. It's like, there's less of a foundation. There's something missing, right? And for you, having that desired end state allows you to be more flexible in the activities that you choose to go into. It allows you to be a bit more flexible in, the decisions that you make, in their activities, in what stakes you decide to take part in, et cetera. Right. So I guess that's really what's coming through for me is that, where you're going. Doesn't matter if it's through martial arts or through shooting or anything else for that matter. The fact that you've got something that you're working towards makes it such that needing the confidence, I guess, is to do it is it's almost like tertiary. Whereas like a lot of people, they're they don't have a why, right? You're using your terms, right? They don't really have those whys. Maybe they have the what they're doing, the skill they're working on, or the stakes that they have, and the activities they're working on. But then it's almost like they're just like on a treadmill. They're on they're like in a hamster wheel. They're not getting anywhere, right? But you have something at least to measure against. Am I closer in my family relationships? Am I closer with my boy? Right? Am I communicating well with my wife in terms of our partnership as in our marriage?
Yeah, I want to share something with you, and I know you aren't recording video, so you may might be just something to share later, or maybe I'll just read it to you.
Sure.
So this is actually my desired end state. I've got this on a vision board that I keep on my. I've got my own like private website just for myself, but I also put it on my desktop on my computer. So it has two elements. It's got a positive one and a environment that I want to create, and a negative environment that I want to avoid, which is another really important piece. So this is it. I'll hold the obligation to have a life of clarity and purpose, to create an environment where I feel powerful, fulfilled, peaceful, and joyful, to give intentionally to new causes, create epic experiences for my family, and inspire others to lead purposeful lives because I have the ability to transcend obstacles, enabling my family legacy to expand, and to avoid an environment where I feel worthless, empty, and broken, so that I don't sink into addictions, negative thought spirals, or suicidal thoughts because I've wasted my life due to being disconnected from my family, losing our traditions, and losing our faith foundation. So how I use that as a decision filter, if after experiencing something a couple of times, it moves me closer or to and faster towards that positive, I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to do more of it. If it brings up those emotions in that negative one after a couple of times of doing it, I'm not going to do it anymore. Whether it's a relationship, whether it's an activity, whether it's a career, I'm not going to do it long term if it moves me closer to that negative state, because that's not a place that I want to move towards. So if I sense in any way I'm moving on a trajectory towards that, I'm going to take some steps to change.
That's awesome, dude.
And it's not easy. It never is.
But no. Yeah. Well, no.
Important.
That's completely different. Thing altogether, right? But the perseverance that we were talking about earlier, right? But I mean, again, I think the clarity alone of where you want to go. I mean, right in front of you, right? What I want, what I don't want. That's a huge step that I venture to say most people do not have that kind
Oh,
of.
I guarantee you, maybe 1% of the world, maybe less, has statements like that put together for their life.
So it's like,
and they're pretty much all Navy SEALs.
Yeah, it's like, listen, in the moment, I don't know, I might not know what I'm doing right now, right? What I'm trying here, but I know where I'm going.
Yeah.
I mean, there's huge power in that. There's huge confidence that comes from that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Power is another really interesting word that I've learned I learned a lot of things from Larry, but I love his distinctions, his very precise language. And one of them is power is the ability to influence change.
Mm.
And that can come personally. It can, be electricity lighting this room. It could be hydraulic power that, I love as a mechanical engineer, but it's that ability to change things, to do work, to make things happen.
Mm.
And you can, it's not an innate quality either. It's something you can produce through actions, through gaining confidence, through gaining knowledge and practice.
There's power. As you say, you can cultivate that. You can find ways to create and generate that, harness it. Then you ultimately need a place to direct it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And I think that's the beauty of what you were, we've been talking about with you and what you've been able to do. With like you're just the things that you're doing with your boy is a case in point of that, right? Like you've got the power there to influence him and actually to take, to do this even on your own. But you have somewhere you're going with it. It's not just, okay, yeah, let's take this class. It's like, let's go hand in hand together and grow and get closer as father and son in this, and make our family stronger. So yeah. It's beautiful stuff, man. Dan Zehner, this was awesome, dude. Listen, I think the people will find their way to this. It's gonna be a lot. Good stuff. Where, if they could connect, if they wanted to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, probably the easiest. I'm pretty available on Facebook. You can shoot me a message anytime. I've also got a podcast called The Anthem of the Adventurer, so you can listen to my interviews and my own musings about the importance of adventure in our lives, especially as fathers. And if you like John Eldridge, that's a good place to go. And my website also anthemoftheadventurer.com. You can find back episodes of the podcast there. Yeah, that's probably the easiest ways.
Awesome. Dan, thanks again, brother. Appreciate this.
Hey, thanks, Phil, for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's been excellent. Always good to connect with you, man.
Folks, I hope you appreciated that chat with Dan. I really appreciated his openness in sharing his journey with his boy as well as his personal journey. It's always fascinating to me to hear stories from parents that take on a new challenge along with their children as a way to not only learn something new, but also to share a unique experience with them. So that's it for today's episode. This is Philip with the Everyday Fighter Podcast. Talk to you next time.